subscribe, please click the like button, share and subscribe. It's free.
My one worrying point that I've been toying with over the past couple of years is when one talks about the repatriation of land and wealth, and quite rightly so too, and reparation for the past, what I see happening now in the country is that the country is being sold off to the highest bidder, which is a little bit of a worry. It's not necessarily the white people who are living in this country now who own all the land and the mineral rights and the harbours and the airports and the new runways that they put into places which are very, very rich in geological finds, where huge Chinese aircraft carriers fly in twice a month, who come in and just cream off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of wealth, which is legitimately done because it's been sold to them. Where is that all going to end?
Our white compatriots, all of you have to accept you all benefited from apartheid.
I think it's a lot of bull. In the sense, I was born in 1954. If you can tell me what benefits I gained from apartheid, I'll tell you zero.
The apology still remains relevant for us because what that has to do is to do with leveling with our fellow South Africans. It has to do with getting ourselves into an honest relationship with the past. And if we aren't being honest about our difficult past, we aren't being honest about anything.
An apology should not be a verbal apology that would go down, but an apology would be accepted to give us back the economy, because everything that was taken from us was illegal.
I think an apology would perhaps assist to deal with some of the arrogance that emanates from our white fellows, particularly in business.
Nobody was born a racist. There is no gene for bigotry. You were not born a racist. You have to be taught to be a racist, and you have to be carefully taught. And if you haven't seen that musical, in which the last song is, you have to be taught to be afraid of people whose skin is a different shade, of people whose eyes are differently made. You have to be carefully taught.
South Pacific.
Yes, South Pacific. You have to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You have to be carefully taught. And that's what we have to do in this country to keep this racism alive. If we want racism to stop, we have to stop teaching racism. In our homes, in our churches, people, Jesus did not look like the little Pillsbury Doughboy.
So that was about a decade ago, 30 years into democracy. Should those apologies still be coming, Jackie?
I think that's somewhat missing the point. Racism is a system of unequal power relations. So dealing with racism means reversing those unequal relations. And beyond that, we can look at social cohesion programs, which will obviously include things such as repentance, remorse, asking for forgiveness, really acknowledging the wrongdoing. But I think for the most part, our conception and discourse on race and racism is very shallow and intellectually wanting.
Mark, you lived through the apartheid years. Should white South Africans apologize for what happened before 94?
Yes. Whether it be in the form of money or in the form of a sentence, an embargo, or you did that in the past and now we're going to take over and you will suffer the consequences. I don't know how one would proclamate it. And just being a money thing where you have to pay for the sins of the past and you get your book stamped to say, I've paid up and I'm very sorry, and you paid 10% or whatever. I don't think that is gonna root out the racism that there still is. I thought it would all be easing now. I thought we'd be coming together, and I don't want to have a guitar moment and start singing Kumbaya, but we don't seem to be going anywhere.
But Lali,
Very disconcerting.
why haven't we been able to rid this society of racism?
When we talk about land back, the fact that the same townships that were used to segregate the people, they still live there, and those townships form part of the perception that black people are a certain way, stereotypically criminal, or they're just incapable of looking after themselves. So if we aren't able to resolve that first issue, we won't be able to know exactly how to untangle the real experiences that people have with the perceptions that we have of them. for white people, they need to deeply understand, firstly, that them continuing to benefit from the structures that are in place, very few of them have to think about living in a township. Very few of them have to think about being poor. The fact that that's something that seems like a natural fact for them will always continue to blind them from them seeing that racism is what caused this and not the fact that black people or non-white people are a certain way.
Gabriel, firstly, are you apologetic, and what real action, if so, would you pair that with?
I'm certainly not sorry for perpetuating apartheid because I had no hand in it. I think that it was an evil and wicked system and certainly to be regretted. I think that race relations are a difficult thing to talk about. People find it very easy on TV in South Africa to speak about all blacks or all whites as if those groups are monolithic. Of course, there are great varieties within those groups. There are some white racists. Just this weekend, I was looking at a white guy that I've done a YouTube show with, Ramon Cabernac, tweeting things that are clearly racist, getting attention out of that. That's very bad. The Institute of Race Relations has done several polls asking people, who do you think is the biggest racist in politics in the country? Most people say Julius Malema.
Okay.
To say Julius Malema is obviously a racist is not to say that all black people are obviously a racist. There's a huge difference between races and huge differences within races. The economy is smaller than it was in 2010. Black unemployment has doubled since 2008. But in terms of the racial composition of the middle class and the upper class, according to Stats SA's latest numbers, black people are the majority of every income stream in South Africa.
Ayanda, to say you look less than impressed would be the understatement of the year.
Yeah, I really am trying my best to not be shocked at what I'm hearing. Of course, it's going to be beneficial for white people to say that there's nothing to apologize for. You brought up numbers of unemployment and the economy, but you seem to forget the fact that for a good couple of hundreds of years, black people were not allowed to get into the formal economy of the apartheid country here. When you're talking about your polls and saying that Julius Malema is the biggest racist in this country, what shocks me is the ability to even say that a black person can be the biggest racist in the country when black people cannot even benefit anything institutionally from this power dynamic that was created by who? By white people. The white male race did this. They created apartheid. They created the world economic system that we are all beholden to. And unfortunately, we are now suffering because of that. For you to sit there and have the audacity and the gall to say that a black man is the biggest racist in this country, you must say that according to your audience of the IRR, Julius Malema is the biggest racist in the country. What you're painting is a picture that is simply not true.
Lexi, as a younger South African, your take.
I am also quite offended. It just shows that white people have so much privilege.
We're all the same, right?
Please don't disturb as she's speaking.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but my voice is not land. You can't colonize it. So for me, white people have so much privilege to be able to avoid talking about topics like this. Because you said racism is a difficult conversation for you to have. Black people do not have the privilege of avoiding the conversation because they live in those conditions. Their entire beings are tied to that, and they somehow have to make it out of the townships. They have to make it big for their family. And then added on top of that is the guilt that so many successful black people feel because they don't believe they deserve that success, while the rest of their family is at home, still under this big boot of the white man. So no, please don't tell me that white people do not owe us an apology, because they do. And they have never given us that apology.
Do you want to withdraw your comment, Gabriel, having heard what both Lexi and Ayanda have said?
Ayanda said that the poll should refer to the IRR audience, but that wouldn't be true. The people who said that Julius Malema is the biggest racist in the country were randomly selected, and that polling question has been done more than once. So I'm not saying what I think. I'm just saying the upshot of a particular exercise. I also didn't say that I forgot the legacy of white oppression, of racism. The boots of the white man certainly came down on every black person that it could in South Africa since the Union. The thing is that black unemployment has doubled since 2007, 2008. So it's important to recognize that history didn't end in 1994 with apartheid. There's been a whole new story since then. And in that
Thanks
time,
to who?
the people in charge, according to me, are the president, the ruling party. I've heard here that black people can't be in power. They can't benefit from the system because maybe democracy was invented by white people. I dispute that. I think democracy is a universal principle. I think our constitution was written by people of all colors and it binds us all as South Africans together. And in our constitution, the president benefits, the cabinet benefits, parliament benefits. Those are the people who have the most power, the power of the army, the power of the police force. The ANC in the 2000s did a good job. Black unemployment reduced substantially by 2.5 million. The piped water rollout, houses, electricity, the improvement of education standards. The Rainbow Republic was not just a Mandela dream. It was a very lived...
So it started well, but now it's also the fault of those very black people that things are as they are, is what you're suggesting.
Jeremy Conan, there's white people in the ANC as well. There's colored people. It's not about race.
Of course it's about race. This is what happens when you leave your oppressors totally unpunished. You perpetuate this amnesia, this arrogance, this denialism. Anyone who has any capacity to analyze data in this country will tell you that South Africa has become an even bigger white supremacist, anti-black racist neo-colony under a guise of constitutional democracy.
And who do we blame for that?
In the main, we blame the white ruling class of South Africa working with, in muzzling the ANC and pushing it against. Let me tell you what should have happened
briefly.
In 1994. The land should have been returned unconditionally, unreservedly. It was never the land of white people. They imposed themselves, and from the moment they were here, atrocities came. 2, just like it was done to Germany, there should have been reparations. Let us go back to Jan van Riebeeck.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far back, and we're going to talk about reparations. Mark Banks, Jackie started off by saying what we're hearing from someone like Gabriel is the result, basically, of not having punished sufficiently the people who are the oppressors in this country. Should they be punished?
Yes. If not punishment, there should definitely be a reparation of some sort, or a re-educating or a realignment of the way things are going to be or the way things should be. And I don't know what...
Human beings think of that one. Because what you do today is creating the future. I don't think you want the kind of future that you have provided for people in the present. I may be mistaken. You may not know what's going on. You know what's going on. And if I asked you, if every white person in this room who wants to be treated the way we have treated people of color in this country, if you'd like to be treated that way, all you white folks, if you want that for the rest of your life, please stand. Did you understand the directions? If you're white and you think blacks have got it so good in this country and you want to be treated the way they have been for the rest of your life, just stand up. You know why you aren't standing. You know it's ugly, and you know it's happening, and you know you don't want it to happen to you. So I want to know why you're so willing to allow it for others in this post-racial society.
That is.
I'm going to go back to your point about the ego and your question about should white people apologize? Will we get the apology? We never will, because getting the apology is relinquishing of power. And that is getting the most problematic is the white man. You know, white women too, but the white man. For us to get the apology, white people have to see us as equals. And for as long as there are people in the rural areas, people in the townships, people who are struggling, people who are poor, people who have never had the same experiences or the same luxuries, not all white people will ever see us as equal. And you do not apologize to someone unless you see them as a fellow human being.
Toilet lakwami mina liyanuka liyawela uhleli mina emkhukhwini mina libele niyanikhuluma isilungu esisidudla lapha yana.
I end up reparations. came up a lot as far as what people wanted post 1994. Was it a mistake to not grant those in the 90s?
Yes, it was a grave mistake. I think that the TRC was a wonderful opportunity for reconciliation, but it was done wrong.
Was a scam.
Thank you. I believe that it was a scam.
How so?
Because there's no legal recourse that came afterwards. The TRC was an opportunity for there to be reconciliation, an opportunity for there to be reparations paid, an opportunity for scars to be healed. And we need to understand that the Rainbow Nation could not have been built in 4 years. This TRC system, a great system, but it was shoved down our throats. We were forced to forgive. And that's what ends up happening, is that we have an economy that has been now sold to the highest bidder. Instead of putting a plaster on a gaping wound, we were meant to actually take out that wound altogether and repair it from the bone upwards.
Gabriel, is what Ayanda saying making sense? Do you understand the weight of the feeling and what she says should have been done in the 90s?
Yeah, I think it is understandable. I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission left most people kind of a little bit let down, and there's a great number of reasons for that. Part of the reason I talk about the polling, which is randomly done, not with anyone's particular audience, is because...
By your organization, am I right?
Also by a range of others.
Okay.
Afrobarometer, for example, which is run by people with quite a different ideological perspective, but they find the same thing in terms of people's responses to the question, have race relations improved or not? Because if you're in a room with people like us, everyone here has some kind of public-facing personality. There's a kind of brand on sale. And so that brand can go with saying, like, all whites are like this and all blacks are like that. My brand is different. I want to say, within the white group, some people are really good, some people are really racist.
The point I was trying to make is this. The problem with apartheid is that it wasn't an individual project, it was a system.
Yes.
And that is why people want a holistic response and a righting of the wrongs. It was something that was legislated and implemented, whether you were actively using the K word or if you benefited.
Or even not alive, like me. But I agree, it was systemic. And so if you take, this is why title deeds are such an important example. The fact that 80% of black South Africans didn't own their land, couldn't sell their land, couldn't bank, and therefore couldn't build generational wealth. That is a crime against humanity. That is a hugely important part of why we are where we are today. The only way to address that is by having title deeds issued to the 17.5 poor black South Africans living untitled land.
That's not the solution.
Saying sorry is not going to give those people something that they can bank, something they can hand down to their children. Systemic problem means government problem. Systemic solution means government solution.
That's just sheer hogwash. White people continue to benefit from ill-gotten property, which is land and the riches. Reconciliation has to be preceded by justice. And what justice does, it says to white people, the land was never yours, number one. It comes back to its rightful owners. You used brute force. The frontier wars in the Eastern Cape, Isandlana with Amazulu, with Upechwayo, with Utingane, with Makado in Venda, with the Sekukune, Kubapedi. I can go on and on about how African kingdoms uprooted by these very barbaric aliens. If you want to rectify that, you got to begin there and say, everything you have is illegitimate.
Gabriel, you laughed while Jackie was speaking. What in everything that he said was amusing?
He said that everything was peaceful and stable here until the alien barbarians arrived, as if whites are a different species, and also as if the Mkane, I'm probably butchering that pronunciation, please
a white
me,
myth.
Okay, so it's a white myth that there was a sort of conquest under Shaka Zulu in which lots of people died. I think we're fundamentally the same. Black people, white people, colored people, Indian people, people across the world. If you take large numbers, you find most people are reasonable, common sense, want to work, want to tend to their families, want to spend time with their friends. It is only by having a racialized
But you are land thieves. In
lens
this context, you are land thieves. Would you
that
return
you
the land?
come to the position where you think everyone who's white is evil, is a dispossessor, is a barbaric alien, and where you think you can say that on primetime national television and people are going to like you. And what the polling suggests is 25% people will like you, but 75%
Slavery is
disagree
barbarism.
from all races. Most people just don't think like that.
Is colonialism not barbarism?
It is barbaric.
Is it apartheid not barbarism?
Absolutely, Bobby.
Let's allow some other voices into the conversation.
15% of this country is living on 90% of the wealth. And I can tell you that 15% is not made up of majority black people.
It is, according to Stats SA.
No, that's nonsense. Please.
I got this.
Get off the crack pipe,
I got
man.
this. You've got to stop disturbing us when we speak. And we do let you speak and we do let you finish your point. But your privilege comes in when you have the audacity to speak over me and think that you have the authority to do so.
You have the audacity to say things that aren't true.
Authority to do so.
You have the audacity to say things that aren't true and pretend that they are true.
Got to stop
and pretend that you have authority
me.
because of your race.
I'm not saying that I have authority because of my race. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to correct the misinformation and disinformation that is coming out of your mouth. Points that I was saying is that the amount of black people that have access to wealth in this country is astronomically low. But when you look at the people who are controlling the means of production that actually bring the wealth in this country, those are white people. Those are white men.
What's your source? The Stats SA would be a starting point. You can go to people like Oxfam. I mean, even Goldman Sachs. You can go to the IMF, for goodness sake. Their report on inequality in South Africa, they will...
Inequality is great.
Gentlemen, hold on, because Ayanda did want to finish her point.
You also mentioned Mfecane, right? And I want to just emphasize to people that here on the African continent, where's my camera? Here on the African continent, we were living well before white people came here. We had a history before colonialism.
Right.
As Gabriel said, black people are not a monolith. And that is true, we are not a monolith. And so this notion that we were fighting amongst each other and fighting amongst ourselves and white people came and corrected us is something that is simply not true. And that is the myth of Mfecane that needs to be corrected.
I think Gabriel, he doesn't want to listen. And I've noticed a lot of white people are like that.
Yes.
They refuse to listen. You are telling them, as a black person, this and this is what I want. This and this is how you can fix it. But white people refuse, and instead they say, oh no, this is hurting my feelings. And they turn it into something about them again. So you coming here as a white person telling us you have no right to feel this way is a huge insult.
Mark Banks, what do you want to say as the only other white person in the room?
Well, I'm going to kill myself right now. Plug this chair in, and you will turn it on, and I will just...
I might hold on to the metal bars.
There are other ways. I've got an Amazonian blow jar, which I got the other day at China City, funny enough. Which brings me to...
When we come back, we'll ask, well, Gabriel has already given his response. Are all white people racist? Don't go away. Welcome back to the big debate. What is racism? Is it offensive attitudes or insults? And does it include the benefits and privileges that come with being a specific race? In the context of South Africa, many people will say privileges that come with being a white person, even unintentionally as a result of race. Let's go back to 2016.
Are all white people racist?
100%. How can you be a white South African and not be racist?
I am not a racist person. I respect all people. I respect black people, white people, colored people. So I feel it's very offensive to say that all white people are racist. It's just not true.
We've gone through the TRC process, and what we haven't understood is how white people have benefited firstly from apartheid, and secondly how a particular group of white people in this country have become fabulously rich off the back of apartheid. There are two families in this country, the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts, who have as much wealth as 50% of our people. It's an extraordinary crime.
But what about Patches Mutep? He's a multi-billionaire. So why aren't you mentioning him?
I hear what you're saying because, you know, you writing your books and the political elites in the ANC are not oppressed because you are doing the oppressing at the moment along with white. You are the gatekeeper of whiteness, and you sold us out.
We forget that white people today have the option of tapping out, right? So you can sing Jabulani and you can dance, but then you can also remove yourself from the lived experiences of the culture that you're trying. I'm sorry, I'm speaking from the culture that you're trying to represent. That doesn't make you a bad person. It's just the truth of the situation. And I think in South Africa, this is really what the conversation needs to be about. We need to talk about, why did apartheid end? Why did colonialism end? It didn't end because people's perspectives and behavior changed. It ended because it was expensive. It ended because white people couldn't travel anymore. It ended because they couldn't go and play sport. Because entertainment for white people was over. Therefore, they needed to bring equality. That's not, we need to be honest.
It hurts me to see somebody that I have fought for my entire life, okay, in my own way, in what I can do. I'm not a politician, I'm not a statistician, I can't do any of those things. What I can do is talk out about whinging whites that we have in this country.
To say that you fought for my freedom, you didn't fight for anything because I'm not free at the moment.
I merely said I did what I could. And one other thing, do you think for a second, I as a white person do not agree with both you and you?
I don't care. I don't care. At this point in time, white feelings, white opinions don't matter to me because I need the land. I need the
emotion does it stir up for you?
It's sadness. We're going to run circles around this question of, are white people racist? Are they racist? Is this person racist? Are you born with racism? Is racism learned perpetually forever? Because people will defend whiteness. People will defend their privilege. It's just definitely sad.
So what then do we do, Sid? Do we just stop having the conversation?
No, absolutely not. I think the conversation needs to happen earlier. It needs to happen honestly. It needs to happen historically, factually, because Black history is folklore, because it's told verbally. It's not in a book. South African history starts in writing when the white man arrived in South Africa. Until we can come to a common agreement that even the foundations of our society was dismantled by racism, and teach it to its extreme form. It's not enough that the most racist thing a white kid sees when they're in school in history is the Hector Peterson image. That's not enough, because that is not even a fraction of the level of brutality and pain that was involved in that system. And I think until we can honestly depict what racism is and what apartheid was on an educational level, we'll be able to tackle things like this one day. Because right now, it doesn't look as bad as it did. It's the same thing with slavery. Slavery is not taught to the great extent that it could be in schools. Great white sharks changed their entire migration patterns because people were being thrown off of ships. That's not included in history books. That's something you learn once you really dive into the transatlantic slave.
So how do we make our history mainstream then, Jackie? Especially when you consider that there's an entire generation of children who've been born post-1994 in what ideally is supposed to be an entirely different country, but not so much.
A massive onslaught on the teaching of Black history. It also explains how the education system in South Africa works, where you have private, i.e. independent examination board in the private school, over-resourced, highly expensive and commodified, where white people are not interested in inclusivity, in honesty about teaching the real South African history, where the white race is put in their historically accurate place.
Okay, we've addressed perhaps the lack of literature, right? Formal tools to teach about this. Gabriel, what conversations are being had either by yourself or your immediate community with the young white children about racism, what it is, and especially its context in South Africa?
The children that I know all know very well that you ought to judge people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
Do you talk to them about apartheid?
Absolutely.
And what do you say?
That it was a sin, that it was a crime, that it was evil and stupid. The problem in South Africa today with this redistribution idea, the idea that whites have enough money that they can, if they were only to open up their pockets and stolen money, if only they could open up their pockets and give it away, that would cure poverty in South Africa, which is, I think, what we all really agree is the biggest problem. Is that there isn't that much money in the country. And the way to get more money in the country is, I think, by having the attitude of Martin Luther King Jr., of judging people on the content of their character, by working together, by doing what most South Africans say when we ask them, how should you appoint people for jobs in the government? How should you do service delivery? Should you do it by race or should you do it by merit? 20 to 25% say do it by race. I only want black people to get jobs. I only want black people to get contracts. Presumably, like most panelists, they think all whites are evil.
It's also a lack of having authentic, genuine, long-term friendships with people of color and black people, because it's not about
I hate to say this, Black Lives Matter. Of course, all lives matter.
Exactly.
White people are racist. Of course, there are white people who have worked to change that entirely. You're pointing at us and saying a panel of people who just believe all white people are racist. We have best white friends and colleagues who have integrated themselves within Black culture, Black societies, who understand Black tax, who know that, yes, of the percentage of Black millionaires that you name, those millionaires are earning a salary to funnel it down the system because we have parents and grandparents who are still in the rural area. It doesn't matter how wealthy we will become. There will always be a cousin who is too poor for something. We grow up in homes where the dompas is a thing that we see before we have even gone to grade 1. We know what Black history is, but Black history is taught in a context where racism could be dismantled, white supremacy and establishments and whatever the English word is, it could be. But it's taught at such a later stage, and I do have 2 kids, and I can say that it is changing to a degree.
Right. How does one make sense of racial classification in a new South Africa? Still in 2016, here's how that conversation flowed when we had it on the big debate.
Do Indian people feel the same way as colored people, that they are excluded, that they are a separate group and should be dealt with separately?
Well, I don't know. I'm not here as an Indian person. I'm here as a Black South African woman.
I want to put that to you because it was interesting to hear, right? The gentleman saying colored people are being left out of the conversation, essentially. You've got Ranjali, a former journalist who's an Indian woman, saying she stood up, in fact, on that day as a Black South African woman. How much has the dial shifted on that chat today?
I agree with her. I am a Black South African woman and my culture is colored. What I have learned is that in colored communities, we tend to isolate ourselves from Black culture. Perhaps because we don't understand vernacular languages and we don't make that extra effort to try and understand Black culture. We feel like Black people are constantly rejecting us. And we feel that push from white people as well. So it's kind of like we've carved out this little box that we only fit in. And we feel like people put us in this box when we put ourselves in it. I believe that colored people have so much joy to be found in their Blackness, so much happiness to be found in their Blackness.
But not all of them want to be addressed as Black, right, or classified as Black.
Which I think is rooted in anti-Blackness. We can go on and on talking about texturism, about colorism in our communities, about how you need to straighten your hair, or they call you a vuskant. You know, how you need to do certain things to be kind of assimilation with whiteness. The lighter you are, if your eyes are green, blue, then, you know, you are amazing. You're that colored person that everybody wants. It's all about the assimilation to whiteness. So it's not just like our economy is dependent on the white man. Our beauty standards are dependent on the white man and these standards that they've set out for us. And I think colored people have pushed themselves so much into those white standards, into whiteness, that they've forgotten their roots.
Thank you for that, Lexi.
Black economic empowerment was invented by the economic oligarchs to co-opt the leaders of the Black nationalist resistance movement and to dissuade them from following left-leaning, socialist-leaning policies, some of which are expressed in the Freedom Charter.
Big up to Tembegile on his show where it's big debate in Daba. Oh, big up. Really, I enjoyed this show because what they were talking about, racism and the economy being in the wrong hands, while Black people are suffering in South Africa, apartheid still exists. And when you listen to this debate, there are some white people who are not ignorant. There are some who are ignorant, who cannot understand what exactly apartheid did to Black people. And the fact that one of them is even speaking about reparations of what happened, maybe it will bring reconciliation and start talking about the real issue of apartheid. Because apartheid still exists in our country, South Africa. And the reason is the economy is still in the wrong hands. Black people were given power to govern the country, but they were not given the land and the economy of the country. It still remains because the power is where it remains. Because you can be given power to be a president, but people will still suffer. And you will look stupid as a president. How Black people are still suffering, who are majority in your own country. And the minority are the most richest because the economy was not transferred in 1994 when negotiated during the time when we get independence in South Africa. So it's kind of crazy when you listen to this debate, you hear people who are talking like they don't know what really happened. Because as they talk, you can't say, I was born in such and such a year and I was not part of apartheid. Your parents were part of apartheid. The properties that you still own today are proceeds of apartheid. So how do you run away from that? It is really kind of crazy when you listen to this. Family, when you listen to this debate, what comes to mind when you listen to this arrogant guys and you listen who do not want to listen? And there's one thing I liked about the colored lady who said, no, me, I'm not a colored. I am a colored because, but I portray myself as a black person. I don't see myself as a colored. It's just a difference of languages and a skill color. That is it. Because most colored, they want to be portrayed like they are white people when it's not right. So, and I like one Indian came up and when they were asking how she feels about being an Indian, said, I'm not an Indian, I'm a black South African. Just to cut them off to understand that. Because Indians, it's only the hair that is different. We are all black the same. And this labeling of black and all this, and we have Elliot. Oh my gosh, Jane Elliot. When she speaks about race, the passion that she has about race, you really realize that this lady needs to be brought to South Africa just to educate the white people in South Africa to understand what exactly racism does. How could they feel as white people if they could be put in the shoes of black people? And she even made a good example there. But nobody stood up. When she asked them, if you want to be treated like you treat black people, stand up. Nobody stood up. That shows that the cruelty of apartheid and racism is not something that they can take. Like black people swallow a bitter aloe every day, being racially profiled, discriminated in most of the things. Family, what do you think about this? Just drop your own comment, but be respectfully. And make sure you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Bravo to Tembekile for the kindness of the show that she brought up. And it was very educationally, and it left us understanding how other people think and things that we didn't know, we know them today. Thank you, Tembekile, with your show, The Big Debate. Slowly. Rome was not built in one day. One brought a stone, the other brought us a bag of cement, one brought one tile of roof until Rome was built. So we are slowly building South Africa until it's totally liberated. Ngiyathanda nonke ngothando lukalava. Ngithi yini bantu bakithi noma izindlu zodaka kusekhaya la kusekhaya